This article concerns the expansion of Russia into the region between the Black and Caspian Seas, mainly between 1800 and 1864. The main events were the annexation of eastern Georgia south of the mountains in 1800, a series of wars against Turkey, Persia and local rulers to expand and consolidate this bridgehead, the long and bloody Caucasus War to gain control of the intervening mountains, and, in the north, the replacement of steppe nomads with Russian peasants. The southern and eastern area has been well documented by Baddeley, whose 100-year-old book remains unsurpassed. There appears to be no full account of the western and northern area in any language. All dates in this article use the Old Russian calendar. For the Western calendar, add 12 days for the 19th century and 11 days for the 18th century. Early history. Russians first appeared in the Caucasus region in the 9th century when some Rus went down the Volga to trade around the shores of the Caspian Sea. This evolved into two great raids in 913 and 943. The last raid seems to have been in 1041. See Caspian expeditions of the Rus. Also at this time the Rus held Tutarakhan on the Taman Peninsula. For the mid-16th century there was an isolated group of Cossacks on the Terek River, and by around 1550 Cossacks were established on the Don River. Astrakhan was conquered in 1556, giving Russia a base at the north end of the Caspian Sea. They soon made an alliance with Kabadia and built a fort at the mouth of the Sunza River. After about 1580 Russia disengaged from the Caucasus region for about 200 years, holding Astrakhan and slowly pushing settlement south toward the Black Sea. During the so-called Russo Persian War, Persian subjects fought Cossacks on the Sunza River. In 1688 Stenka Razin raided the Caspian coast. During the Russo-Persian War, Peter the Great conquered the west and south shore of the Caspian, but the land was soon returned when Persia grew stronger. In 1775, after a Russian explorer had died in captivity, Catherine sent a punitive expedition which briefly captured Urban. During the Persian expedition of 1796, Russia again conquered the west coast of the Caspian, but the expedition was withdrawn when Catherine died. Underlying all of this was the slow and steady expansion of Russian population southward from its original heartland in Muscovy. By around 1800, Russia was in a position to push soldiers and colonists into the Caucasus region. South of the mountains, Russia annexed eastern Georgia in 1800. By 1806, Sitsionov had expanded this bridgehead from the Black Sea to the Caspian and gained the Caspian coast. In 1813, Persia was forced to recognize the loss of its northern territory, comprising modern-day southern Dagestan, eastern Georgia, and most of what is now the Azerbaijan Republic. In 1818 to 1826, Yermolov tightened the noose around the mountains, but much of this was soon lost. In 1828, Russia took what is modern-day Armenia, Nikishevan, and Talish from Persia. The two Turkish wars had few results before the Russians came. For the days of the Roman Empire, Transcaucasia was usually a borderland between two empires, often centered in Constantinople and Persia. Areas would shift from one empire to the other. The rulers would have varying degrees of independence, and the common people suffered much from the wars. Local rulers were often vassals of one empire or the other, but this could vary from complete subjection to a few empty words. Much depended on the size and proximity of the suzerain's army. By around 1750 the area was divided between Turkish and Persian vassals. The western two-thirds was inhabited by Georgians, an ancient Christian people, and the eastern third mostly by Azeris, Turkic Muslims who emerged as a people at an uncertain date. Russia had long held Astrakhan at the north end of the Caspian and was pushing close to the Black Sea. There were also Cossacks along the Terek River who would soon grow into the North Caucasus Line. Annexation of eastern Georgia in 1762, Heraclius II of Georgia joined the two eastern parts of Georgia into the kingdom of Kartli. It was a Persian vassal, but Persia was very weak following the death of Nadir Shah. Due to that, Heraclius II was able to maintain a de facto independence through the entire Zand period. By this time Russia had a fair number of troops north of the mountains at such places as Mosda. During the Russo-Turkish War, fought mostly in the west, Catherine launched a diversion in the east and, for the first time, Russian soldiers crossed the Caucasus. In 1769 Gottlieb Heinrich Tottleben with 400 men and 4 guns crossed the Darial Pass to Tiflis. Next year, reinforced, he went to the kingdom of Imereti, stormed Baghdati and took the capital of Kutaisi. After dispersing 12,000 Turks he laid siege to Poti on the coast. The business was mismanaged and Russian forces were withdrawn to the North Caucasus Line in the spring of 1772. In July 1783, the same year that Crimea was annexed, the king made himself a Russian rather than Persian vassal. Pavel Potemkin sent 800 men to begin work on the Georgian military highway through the Darial Pass. By October 1783, he was able to drive to Tiflis in a carriage drawn by 8 horses. On the 3rd of November 2 Russian battalions and 4 guns reached Tiflis on the new-made road. It was a gloomy day and the locals remarked that the new friends has brought the weather with them. The troops were soon withdrawn but the presence further provoked Persia. Aga Muhammad Khan Qajar was working to restore Persian power and saw the king of Georgia as another disobedient wali. In 1795 he captured and sacked Tiflis. Viceroy Gudovich, who in January 1791 had arrived on the line with 15 battalions of infantry, 54 cavalry squadrons and 2 Cossack regiments, did nothing. Aga Muhammad was assassinated in 1797 while preparing a second invasion. The Russo Persian War was, in part, a Russian response to the Persian sack and recapture of Tiflis. In the summer of 1800 Fath Ali Shah Qajar demanded that George XII of Georgia send his son the Tehran as a hostage. General Noring, who commanded the line, was told to prepare 9 infantry battalions. The Persians backed off but the Aga Khan Omar invaded anyway and was defeated by General Lazarev on the Alazani River. George XII, who was dying, offered the Russians increasing amounts of authority. Paul I of Russia responded by annexing the kingdom on the 18th of December 1800. First years. Russian officials in Georgia were the envoy Kovalensky and generals Noring and Lazarev. In May 1801 the heir to the throne was removed and Lazarev became head of a provisional government with Noring as commander-in-chief. In April 1802 the nobles took an oath to the Russian crown. Kovalensky wrote to the Shah demanding that Persia renounce all claims to Georgia. Fath Ali replied that eastern Georgia had always been Persian and announced his intention to send 60,000 soldiers north. From sea to sea. Sitsionov. In September 1802 Pavel Sitsionov was appointed Commander-in-Chief of Georgia and Inspector of the Line and Governor-General of Astrakhan. He was descended from Georgian nobles who had fled to Russia with Vakhtang V in 1724. He could see himself both a servant of the Tsar and Georgian patriot, holding that only Russian power could protect Georgia from Persians, Turks, mountain raiders and internal disunity. He arrived in early 1803. His first concern was to remove the remaining members of the royal family. Prince Alexander of Georgia had already gone over to the Persians. When General Lazarev went to arrest the late king's widow, she stabbed him to death. Unification of Georgia. In December 1803, the Western Principality of Mingrelia became a Russian vassal. The Kingdom of Imereti now had Russians on both sides. After some military pressure, in April 1804 it became a Russian protectorate. Much of Georgia was now reunited after 400 years. The coastal forts like Poti remained Turkish. In March 1805 an expedition captured the Turkish fort of Anakia on the Abkhaz border. Under Ottoman threat, Tsitsinov withdrew, calling it the unauthorized action of a subordinate. In 1810 Russia put its client at the throne of the Principality of Abkhazia. Push east and south. In the spring of 1803 he subdued the Jero-Belikhani area and the Ilishu Sultanate. Later General Guliakow was killed fighting the Jero-Belikhanis. In January 1804 the Ganja Khanate was bloodily conquered. In the summer of 1804 Tsitsinov led 10,000 men against the Yerevan Khanate. He besieged Yerevan. The Persians got behind him and after some fighting he made a difficult withdrawal. This was the start of the Russo Persian War. In May 1805 the Karabakh Khanate submitted. Abbas Mirza and 20,000 men arrived. The garrison held out for 3 weeks until the 100 survivors cut the way out. Fath Ali Shah Qajar with 40,000 men approached, thought better of it and retired. In 1805 Tsitsinov took over the Shuragal Sultanate, Shaki Khanate and Shirvan Khanate. The Caspian flotilla under General Zavalevshin laid siege to Baku but was driven off by the Khan of Guba. Tsitsinov went east with 1,600 men and 10 guns. He crossed the Shirvan Khanate, which he annexed on the way, and arrived before Baku before the 8th of February 1806. The town elders delivered him the keys to the city. He returned the keys asking to receive them from the Khan in person. The Khan rode out with an escort. Tsitsinov advanced with 2 other men and was shot dead. The guns of Baku opened up on the Russian army and Zavalevshin again chose to withdraw. The disaster of Tsitsianov's death and Zavalevshin's apparent cowardice was retrieved by General Glazanap, who commanded the line. He crossed the Aktish country to Turkey where the Shamkal joined him. Knowing that the Khan of Derbent was unpopular, the Shamkal sent agents to stir up trouble. When the Russians crossed the border, the Khan was expelled by his own subjects and Derbent was occupied for the 4th and last time. The campaign was interrupted by the new commander-in-chief Gudovich, who was perhaps growing incompetent. Glazanap was placed under General Bulgakov, and it was Bulgakov who received the surrender of Guba and Baku. Russia now held the area between the Black and Caspian Seas and had provoked a war with Persia. War with Persia and Turkey. During this period Russia was at war with Persia and Turkey. Most Russian forces were tied up dealing with Napoleon, and the main Russo-Turkish conflict was on the other side of the Black Sea. The Turkish War left the frontier unchanged, and the Persian War forced Persia to recognize the Russian conquest of the eastern Transcaucasus and Caspian coast. Viceroys during the war years were 1802, Pavel Tsitsinov, 1806, Ivan Gudovich, 1809, Alexander Tormasov, 1811, Philip Osipovich Paulucci, 1812, Nikolai Tishev. The war with Turkey need not concern us since it left the border unchanged, although Russia did retain the Black Sea port of Sukhangal. Russia might have accomplished something, but its soldiers were busy holding down the new one Caucasus, fighting the Persians, fighting the Turks on the opposite side of the Black Sea, and watching Napoleon. Apart from military heroics, its main importance was to tie down troops that could have been used against Persia. The first 2 years of the Persian War involved the conquest of the Khanates. In 1804 Russia took Ganja but was defeated by the Persians when it tried to take Yerevan. Next year it took Shaki and Karabakh. Persia sent an army to rescue Karabakh and was defeated. By early 1806, Shirvan and the Caspian coast were taken. Russia now had all the Persian territory it would ever get, except Talish, Yerevan and Nakhchivan. The Persian front became quiet when the Turkish War started. In 1808 Gudovich failed to take Yerevan and resigned. In 1812 Abbas Mirza invaded eastern Karabakh, defeating the Russian garrisons. Pyotr Kotlyarevsky was sent east, defeated the Persians at Aslan-Uz, crossed the steppe and bloodily captured the capital of Talish. In 1813 Persia signed the Treaty of Galliston, which recognized the Russian possession of the Khanates. Internally, Imereti, Guria and Abkhazia were annexed or brought under more complete control, thereby completing the second phase of the unification of Georgia. A rebellion in eastern Georgia was put down. In 1811 the Russians were defeated in Guba and stormed the capital of the Korean Khanate. In 1812 the Ossets were driven back from Tiflis and a Dagestani army under Prince Alexander was defeated. In 1813 Simonovich went deep into the mountains and took Shatili, the chief stronghold of the Khazars on the Upper Argon. With the end of the wars the mountain chieftains and Georgian rebels became quiet, seeing no hope for support from the two Muslim empires. The age of Yermolov arrived in the autumn of 1816. He brought with him Velyaminov as chief of staff. Like many such people, Velyaminov was more intelligent and less charismatic than his chief, and the two made a good pair. Velyaminov wrote the memoir and the commentary which outline the basic Russian strategy as a great siege. Some think Yermolov's harshness provoked the long and bloody Murid War, but during his rule it appeared that he had subdued most of Dagestan and part of Chechnya. Before he could take charge he had to go to Persia and deal with the results of the recent war, which he did successfully. Russia, having gained control of the Transcaucasus and the Caspian coast, attention now turned to the intervening mountains. This meant primarily the high plateau of Dagestan and forest belt on the north slope of the mountains. His first concern was to strengthen the northern line and push it further south. 3 new forts were built: Grozny in 1818, Venezapna in 1819 and Berna on the mountain above Taki in 1821. They were connected by a line of smaller forts. In 1818 the Dagestanis saw what was coming and formed an alliance of Arya, Mekhilalit, Karakai-Tag, Tabasaran, Kazakhamak and Akusha. This led to the first Russian campaign into mountain Dagestan. Pestel advanced to Bashli and Karakai-Tag and was forced back to Derbent with a loss of 500 men. Yermolov moved south from Taki to Mekhitalil, sacked the abandoned Parail, stormed the capital and abolished the Mekhuli Khanate. Bashli was retaken and destroyed and Yermolov returned to the line. In the summer of 1819 the mountaineers rose again, mainly in the south. Valerian Madatov, who replaced Pestel, took Tabasaran and in October retook Bashli and Karakai-Tag. When the Khan of Shaki died without a direct heir, the Russians occupied Nukha and abolished the Khanate. In Yermolov's own words, he obtained the Khanate by interpreting treaties as Musulmans interpret the Quran, that is, according to circumstances. The Ava Khan attacked Venezapna, was defeated and replaced by his son. About this time a number of eastern Chechens drove off some horses near Venezapna. Yermolov chose to drive them back to their own country. On the 15th of September, Dadayurt was bloodily captured and the remaining clansmen fled west to the mountains. In November, Yermolov and Madatov attacked Akusha. The elders came out to parley and were kept talking until late at night. When they left, the Russians made a flanking maneuver and defeated them at Lavashi the next morning. The Akusha people, who had once defeated Nadir Shah, submitted and kept faith for 7 years. In June 1820 it was the turn of Kazakh. Matadov crossed the mountains from Shervan and defeated an estimated 20,000 men near Kosrek, 23 kilometers southeast of Kumak. The Khan fled to his capital, but the inhabitants shut the gates against him and surrendered to the Russians. Leaving Kumak, the Russians received the submission of Kubachi, a free community famous for its weapon makers. Yermolov reported to the Tsar that the subjugation of Dagestan was now complete, even though the far western strip had not been touched. Shervan was annexed on the 30th of August 1820, the old Khan fleeing to Persia. Yermolov spent the whole of 1821 in Russia. The Ottoman-Persian War broke out, but Russia did not intervene and there were no territorial changes. In 1822 there was a dynastic dispute in Karabakh and the Khanate was turned into a province. In 1823 Amallah Bek, a nephew of the Shamkal and a state prisoner, murdered his friend Colonel Verkhovsky while out riding and fled to Kunzik but was rejected there. He soon gained many supporters. General Krab chased him, destroyed Karanai, was defeated at Urpeli and withdrew. Yermolov appeared with a small additional force and his reputation was enough to cause the natives to submit. For the first time Russian troops went into winter quarters in the mountains. About this time a certain Abdullah, a relative of the deposed ruler of Derbent who lived in Kaitag, was accused of brigandage. Unable to capture him, General Krab put a price on his head. Someone placed a bomb in his house, killing Abdullah and 16 other people. This drew a rebuke from the Tsar, but Yermolov defended his subordinate. In 1824 a man named Baybullah started a new rebellion. He was supported by a holy man who claimed to have been visited by an angel. The rebellion spread from the Sulik to the Sunza. General Grekov, a man reputedly more harsh than Yermolov, marched hither and thither but could not suppress it. On the 9th of July 1825 2,000 rebels captured Amir Haji Yurt and killed most of the garrison. Next day they besieged Gurzul. On the 15th it was relieved by Grekov and Lisanovich. The two generals demanded that the local leaders come to the fort to offer submission. 300 arrived, many of them armed, but no precautions were taken. Lisanovich began abusing them in the local language and calling out names from a list. The first two surrendered the Kinzels, but the third, Yukahaji, refused to budge. When Grekov tried to disarm him by force, Yuka stabbed him in the stomach, killing him on the spot, and then turned on Lisanovich before he was cut down. The dying Lisanovich cried out, "Kill them!" and the soldiers fired on the fleeing natives, killing most of them. Yermolov arrived from Tiflis with 7,000 reinforcements, rearranged the fortifications, but little fighting took place. In early 1826 Yermolov engaged in the usual village burning, forest cutting and skirmishing, and the rebellion seemed to go quiet. In December 1825 Alexander I died and was replaced by Nicholas I, who seems to have been somewhat hostile to Yermolov. In July 1826 the Persians invaded Karabakh and Ganja. Yermolov, who was happy to fight tribesmen, hesitated to attack the Persian army and asked Nicholas for 2 divisions. Nicholas sent 1 division and told Yermolov to invade Yerevan. Yermolov replied that this was impossible and Nicholas replied by sending out Ivan Paskevich. The two could not cooperate. Paskevich had the support of the Tsar and in late March 1827 Yermolov resigned. War. Again in this period, Russia again fought the two Muslim powers. The Russo Persian War broke out when Persia invaded the flat country on the east side of Karabakh and Ganja. Yermolai was replaced by the more aggressive Ivan Paskovich. By the end of 1827 he had conquered the Khanates of Yerevan, Nikishevan and Talish, that is, modern Armenia and the southeast corner of Transcaucasia. Just after the conclusion of peace, Turkey declared war, mainly because of Russian intervention in the Greek War of Independence. As usual, the Caucasus front was a sideshow to the main fighting in the Balkans. In 1828, Paskovich took two border forts and the Turkish city of Kars. In 1829 he pushed on to the larger city of Erzurum. Peace was made in September of that year. The treaty mainly concerned the Balkans, but on the Caucasus side, Russia returned most of the Turkish territory but kept the two border forts and the Black Sea ports of Poti and Anapa. Later, attention now turned to the Murid War, in which the mountaineers of Dagestan and Chechnya united and held out until 1859. In the western mountains, the long Russo-Circassian War continued. It ended in 1864 with the expulsion to Turkey of several 100,000 Circassians. The Crimean War changed little. In the Russo-Turkish War, Russia gained the province of Kars and the port of Batum. During World War I, Russia collapsed during the revolution and the Turks pushed as far east as Baku but then withdrew when their own empire collapsed. In the post-war confusion, Turkey regained Kars. During World War II, the Nazis got a little beyond Maikop but were unable to reach the Baku oil fields. After the war, Russia tried and failed to take part of northern Persia. In 1991, Transcaucasia became independent as the states of Georgia, Armenia and Azerbaijan. In 1992, Abkhazia and South Ossetia became de facto independent of Georgia with Russian backing. In 1994, Nagorno-Karabakh was de facto taken from Azerbaijan by Armenia.